my post. How do I say this? Stream starting again. Restarting. What the hell? Bad with words. Come join. All right. How do I say so now there's a little bit of feedback. So if you could grab a pair of headphones, that'd be awesome too. Bad with words. Come join. How do I say so now there's a little bit of feedback. So if you could grab a pair of headphones, that'd be awesome too.
Oh man, why didn't you tell me before?
That's okay. Go grab them right now. And there's a delay. I wonder why there's a delay. I think it might be you're connected to are you watching the stream itself, or are you just listening to me from your headset? Oh, it's a little bit of I can't hear you now. Nope. I think it might be. Let's reconnect. Let me call you back. Let's see what happens if I call you back. Might work if I recall you. Technical difficulties are the story of my life. Right. At least I have my guest back, so. Oh, that's why. Okay. It was coming through her laptop, so hopefully this is gonna work. Bum 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 bum. Let's see if she can call me. Sorry if you are tuning in now. We're trying to get this set up, so... Oh, there we go. I'm going to call here. Let's hope the audio is connected. Can you hear me? Oh, I think you could hear me, but I can't hear you, which is...
I can hear you, but it seems as though
it's working. Emily, it's working.
It's because I took my headphones out.
Okay, perfect. All right,
all right.
It's working for me, so I'm gonna confirm if we're streaming here, and I think we're live, and I think we're good, and this is good. It's finally getting good. I think we're live, and I think we're good. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the delay. There was some minor difficulties because we are about 10 hours in between. I think where Emily Ann is right now, she's about 10 hours ahead of us. So that means it's an early morning, and I think her alarm didn't go off on time. So it has nothing to do with you. It's just that it's really hard to set these things up. I'm starting to learn from this. Let me see if I can accept the camera here. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
I can see us now. Yeah. No. So I think it's such a hard thing to kind of coordinate with people to get on a stream that is informal as this one. And I'm very happy that you're joining us because I am still very excited about some of the things I wanted to talk to you about today. Maybe what I'll do is I'll try and frame the conversation and start off by talking about what I was saying earlier, and how I know you. How do I know how we met? And we haven't even met in real life, which is funny. We've never met in real life. But through a Facebook post that we did a couple years ago, I think we kind of jumped on the same conversation, and then we connected that way because we had similar ideas on the same thing, and that's why that's why we became Facebook friends. And then we had a long conversation. We talked to each other for a long time, kind of just gauging each other and sharing ideas and stuff. So, and we always wanted to meet up for a coffee, but it never kind of came around because of
I'm rarely in
distance.
the country, and you're never in the same place as I am either. So yeah,
Exactly. So I'm welcome to the show, and thank you very much for joining us. And I'm excited to talk to you.
me too.
Where are you? Where are you right now?
So I'm in Cox's Bazar, which is at the southern tip of Bangladesh, and it's right along the coast of Myanmar. And the reason for which I'm here is that there's about 1 million people that were recently displaced. So working on that.
And how long have you been in Bangladesh now for?
It's my third weekend, so I guess I'm starting my fourth week of a 3-month deployment.
That's incredible because as a Canadian, not only do I'm very, I don't know where Bangladesh is. I did some research and I know it's sort of close to the coastal areas of like, Singapore and that area. But
It's between
oh, sorry, go ahead.
it's between like India and Bhutan and Myanmar, and it's right up in the armpit of the easternmost side of the Indian Ocean.
I'm so fascinated. What brought you over to Bangladesh?
Flight? Just kidding. So so I do these types of deployments when there's humanitarian emergencies. So when we have specific types of requests for experts to deploy, I can be sent anywhere in the world where there's an accrued situation where they need assistance. So my specialty is information management, and it's a bit of data science. It's a bit of public relations, communications, photography. There's a lot of stuff. It can go in multiple different directions, but the idea is that you want to have evidence-based decision making, which it is a key phrase, but it's acting blindly and hand out interventions. You want to make sure that, first of all, you're targeting the right people, you're giving the right the intended outcome. So we're tracking all of the things that are being done and making sure that it does have the effect that we want it to. That's the idea.
That sounds like a lot of sounds like a lot on your resume. Let me ask you this. Let me back up a little bit. So I know that you're from Montreal, correct?
Yep.
Born and raised?
Yep. I'm a French Canadian, Québécoise.
Wow, that's great. That's it's like, it's so funny because you grow up and we learn a lot about French Canadians, but do we actually meet one? That's a different story. And it's funny because it's the same way in Ontario and it's the same way in Alberta. I'm telling you right now. And like the kids learn French Canadian. Sorry.
No, I was just saying there's 7 million Quebecers, so it's not like we're unicorns or anything.
I know, exactly, and I sound really bad I don't mean to say it. It's just that it's just great to have a French Canadian friend, and I've also had French immersion in my high school and getting to know some of my friends who kind of learned French as a second language, but to actually meet someone who is French Canadian, and in Alberta there's francophone schools, and it's great I've been in a few of those schools, and I think if I had a kid, I would definitely put them in that school as well. But where did you go to school for information tech or information analyst or your line of work?
I mean, I wanted to link up with your previous comment and say I've never studied English in my life. So I always went to French schools. My uni was it's called Université du Québec à Montréal, so UQAM. And it's one of the 4 universities in Montreal, but it's kind of the more left-wing, kind of the People's University, which came about in the 60s when the church was...
Sorry, you're cutting off a bit. Sorry.
Never studied anything like...
You're cutting out a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's the internet, but we'll try to work through this. So
I have my graduate degree is in international law, and my undergrad is in history.
So you did your master's in what school?
Same school at UQAM, which is the university that I was talking about, which is slightly left-leaning. It's a French university. It's not very well known in the rest of Canada, of course. But we have all of our kind of politicians who are more socialistic or more, they'll have like anarchist themes and kind of critical science type stuff, critical legal studies kind of. That's the type of, or like very much, feminist schooling or critical, schooling, third wave feminists. There's a lot more of that kind of intellectual discussions going on within the departments that I was studying. Sure.
My question would be for law school in Canada. I know that it's difficult to get into. So
Yep.
Was that tough? The decision to go into law, was that a tough decision, or was that a hard experience? How did that work?
So that's a really weird question. Actually, I didn't do law school in the intended sense of when you're saying law school is hard to get into. I did it just as a graduate program, so it's not as hard to get into. And the difference between a graduate and an undergraduate is the undergraduate, you have to, first of all, it's a lot more difficult because it's a lot more technical.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you have to go past the bar, and then you have a bunch of internships, and then you get the official title of lawyer. I have nowhere near those credentials.
Mm-hmm.
My graduate studies in law were based on the idea that you want to study the impacts of different laws and also policies on various parts of the population. So when you look at international law, you want to look at all the different conventions, the Geneva Conventions, all the human conventions, or even environmental conventions, which prevent us from polluting on water, for example. Those types of conventions, really, like all you do is kind of decompose and study what that impact had on society. It can be, indigenous persons. It can be, did it impact women differently? How did it influence social behavior? Stuff like that.
Europe must fascinate you.
Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's probably my favorite continent. I would love to live there. I definitely think that, without saying something overly negative about Canada and North America, but I feel like the amount of reflection and intellectualism in Europe is a lot higher. They have a lot more of a subtle opinion about basically everything than North Americans in general. I don't have a lot of American friends, or I don't know that many Americans, but to generalize, when I'm in Europe, the discussions that I have feel a lot more like profound, and you can just discuss the intricacies of something rather than saying, well, that guy's just a bad guy, so we should kill him. Which sometimes, when it comes to...
Yeah, all my friends talk like that. No.
Me too.
No. Okay, well, okay, so now what makes you such an interesting guest is that you are Canadian, but can I go out on a limb and say that you've spent a lot more of your time away from Canada, or at least meaningful time, because you've worked overseas for a long time, and I think work is a big part of our life, and that through work we kind of find ourselves. Do you find that you've found who you are overseas as opposed to being in Canada per se?
That's more than one question at the same time, I'd say. First off, right now, my time.
Sorry, Emily Ann, you know what happened? Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Our once in a while you'll get cut off because of the internet, but just when you do, I'm just going to have you repeat yourself. So go ahead again and start from what you were saying.
I was just saying, these days I spend about 60% of my time outside of Canada. But as time goes by, and now I'm 31, so as time goes by, the more I'm absolutely in love with my city. And that has grown with time. Before I would take it for granted, but now the more I go to all kinds of different places, I'm in love with Montreal. I go home and I just want to walk the streets and read history books about Montreal. And that never happened before. So maybe I found myself, but maybe I found a renewed appreciation for my own city and what I have, and the incredible luck I have to live in the best city in the world, in my opinion. But there's something about, they used to call it like Orientalism and finding the other in order to find yourself. And that, I've been living abroad and then going back for the past 10 years since I had my first internship, maybe even 11 years now, because it started when I was 19. And I think at some point you get saturated with comparing yourself, and then you're kind of just reiterating, like, oh, yeah, I know that this is there, and I know that I don't want it, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, I think when you're early 20s, you're kind of a little bit more frantically like, I'm gonna try this, and I'm gonna go surfing for 3 days, and then I'm gonna go party, and then I'm gonna go, and like, whereas now I find a lot more focus, and the work definitely in itself gives my life meaning. It's an incredible privilege to be able to do what I'm doing. That's not to say that it's not hard, but sometimes I just feel incredibly grateful that I get to do this. Yes, so that's a complex answer to a complex question.
It's very admirable. I'm going to speak on behalf of a lot of people. I think some people won't even admit it, but taking the plunge and going overseas to live your life, to find work, and to find your vocation is something that not many people dare to even do. I often talk about leaving Canada to teach overseas, and the idea, it comes into fruition, but I can't take that step out, and I can do those trips, and I can totally see myself doing this, but the moment, all the technical things come into play, like moving and doing your visas and getting all that stuff, it becomes a complete mess. And then then you go and your dreams kind of die and wither away because we don't have that ambition isn't strong enough to deal with all the hardships that come with it. So I applaud you, and I'm so envious of what you do. I follow you on Facebook. I know that you have a lot of posts that inform me as a person. There's only several people on my Facebook that I can say that I really look at links, and you are one of those people because you bring a lot of attention about the world to me in Canada, because I think most Canadians are living in a world where we see everything through a lens. We don't experience it unless we travel, and even when we do travel, we become travelers. We're not really living in the moment. So I want to ask you this: as a Canadian that's overseas, what is the perception of people that look at you as a Canadian? Like, is there a specific, do they define you differently from Americans, or are you, do you get that as a Canadian when you represent yourself as a Canadian?
Yeah, actually, it's to the point where, because now I'm in Bangladesh. Last year, to give you some context, I was in Jordan, and longer than that, my active memory is not really working that well. But basically, both in Jordan and in Bangladesh, the same thing happens where if people ask me, where am I from? And I say Canada. They haven't been there, of course. But, oh, Canada! I love Canada. Canada. I mean, it is. It's not underappreciate my country, but like the kind of nerd in me is like, what is it about Canada or the U.S. or the American dream? What is it about this pull that keeps drawing people towards North America and the ideal and everything? But I have to add also that there is right now obviously a government which is in place and has a much better outreach internationally, and I mean, usually these things take time in order for the reputation abroad to kind of follow the step of what's going on with the current national government. For example, when Harper was in, I was talking about the malicious effects that his policies had, but a lot of people hadn't noticed yet because the things that he were doing were more on the economic level, or were on the kind of just grander scheme of things in terms of like bilateral relations with countries, and like the day-to-day, people were not aware of this. Whereas right now with Trudeau, people are like, oh, thank you so much for your migration policy. And like when I was in Istanbul in December, like legit Turkish people and Syrian refugees, a lot of which are in Turkey right now, they were like, thank you so much for letting my brother into the country, or like, we love Canada. Like they were thanking me, and like I didn't do anything for it. I'm pro opening the borders, but I mean it's an incredible privilege. I right now I don't like being recognized as an American, and I would like to. I correct people if they assume that, but at the same time there is something about. I mean, I stick out way like a sore foot here in Bangladesh, especially. I feel like in Jordan it's as bad. I don't know why. Maybe the skin color difference isn't as enormous, whereas here, like, people are very, very dark. So I do stand out, and as a woman, especially, like I should cover. I shouldn't even be having this right here. This isn't even cleavage, but it's. I should be these things. Maybe the dress itself, even if I'm wearing pants and a long sleeve shirt, like I stick out. So whether it's as a Canadian or as just a bit of out, and there's negative and positive consequences, but point is it draws attention. Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to focus a little bit more on you. The countries that you've kind of mentioned, Turkey, Istanbul, Jordan, and now that you're in Bangladesh, from what I read and what the news that I understand, that these countries are mainly of a Muslim population, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe you could describe to me what it's like to live, like what, let's forget about Ecuador because you were in South America as well. Like you've been all over the world. Let's focus a little bit more about where you are right now in Bangladesh. When you wake up, what do you see? Maybe you can describe to me what the world is like there.
Well, let's see if the internet works. This is my extremely messy room. I have no. Let's see. This is gonna be way overblown. This is my hotel.
Oh
it's
my god,
shit.
this is so cool.
And then on the other side, this is like a construction lot. There's some green stuff. It's mostly polluted and nasty. Sometimes there's cows and children. And then like that's the in terms of living in a Muslim country, can I
go on a limb and say that Bangladesh is going through some immense development as we speak? Economic and social development. Okay. You know what? Before we even get, I feel like the political aspect of it, maybe a little bit more on like, what is it like on the daily life of a Bangladeshi? Like, when you're walking down the street and you're getting food and stuff like that, how is that? How's that experience?
So I think Bangladesh is definitely in the top 10 least developed countries right now, or it's one of the highest densely populated countries that's underdeveloped and like severely underdeveloped. So a lot of people walking around don't have shoes. There's open defecation. The stream, we're right next to the ocean, right? But the stream next to it has it's a sludge stream, just like I've seen in bigger cities in China, and I think a lot of people live on rice and corn. And what's unfortunate is that I've heard from some of the food experts around here, because thankfully I'm so lucky I get to hang out with experts. And one of the food security experts was telling me that unfortunately a lot of their water streams polluted with arsenic, and they have no choice but to eat the food that they're producing, isn't it? So this it's so hard because they're feeding themselves, but they're poisoning themselves at the same time. I have no guarantee that I'm not eating arsenic when I have rice or when I have carrots or potatoes and stuff. So some of my colleagues are very fearful of that.
I bet.
You can't fry arsenic out. Like you fry foods in order to remove everything that's like microbial, and that can it cause turmoil in your digestive system. But arsenic is a lot more of a different bug. So that's in terms of food. I think a lot of people live in a precariousness. Obviously, the community that I live with, they have no access to livelihoods. There's just a million people massed in bamboo huts and tents who are trying to reinforce their houses with bamboo structures. They're trying to stay abreast of all the different organizations that are doing handouts. They go gather firewood, which unfortunately is causing massive deforestation. And the cyclone season is coming, so they, that's their day to day. It's like just absolute precariousness.
I have a chat. Chat says, Chrissy Bell says, cows and children. Do you see that a lot? I guess. I mean, even are there lots of agriculture? Is agriculture at a very sort of low, still pretty primitive in a sense?
I think so. I haven't looked into it, but I would be willing to say yes. I think Bangladesh has a history of being having been kind of, with the Cold War, they were a little bit more on the communist side of things. So I think there was a lot of state controlled things, and it's a very authoritarian / dictatorial government. So I think there may be industrial agriculture, but this is all hypothetical. Someone can Wikipedia that and take a look. I don't know.
Okay,
I
so
see a lot of.
sorry, I really want to get this. Most Canadians, and I can speak on behalf of most Canadians, if I was to share what you just talked about from ground zero, the situation that is in Bangladesh, and you're in are you in the capital right now?
No, like I said, I'm in Cox's Bazar.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's okay. Cox's Bazar. It used to be a tourist destination. Well, it still is. There's a lot of tourism here, local tourism.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, this is where the Rohingya population are. And if you've been following,
right,
they're the roughly 1 million Muslim minority, which were kicked out and or massacred from Myanmar, and who ended up here because the government of Bangladesh, had a. They are like you said, they're majority Muslim, and Muslims in general have it as part of their philosophy to help one another, and they're very humanitarian as a philosophy. So they didn't welcome them. They have very limited rights. They can't move from their camp. They don't have access to citizenship or anything like that situation. The government of Bangladesh is but it's been 7 months now that they have an extra million population, and this is a country that's one of the top poorest in the world. So I mean, you can imagine how strained it is in terms of resources and stuff. So that's why I'm not in the capital. I'm here in the southern tip of Bangladesh.
And I'm gonna say that the average Canadian that I know not only has never been exposed to that sort of environment and the obvious devastation that this country, some of the devastating things that are happening right now and the complicated issues that are happening, not only are they not exposed to that, I don't think many Canadians really take world issues to heart. And I guess my thing is, should Canadians really care about some of these things that are happening around the world? Because you as a Canadian, you've invested a large part of your life doing this to humanitarian work and to look at these things, but the average Canadian, I think, I don't want to be, I'm generalizing, and I know that most Canadians are informed. But the idea is, how do we how do we encourage people to do that, or should they even be worrying about these things?
Of course they should be. I mean, I can't say anything other than that I can't reply anything else, but obviously there's a lot more explanation that goes behind that.
Well, what makes you fly across the continent, across the continent, and find yourself in some of the most dangerous and unstable countries of the world? Like, what makes you do that?
Well, okay, on a very personal level, when I see something.
You're cutting off right now, so I'm going to have you repeat yourself. Sorry. Emily Ann, I'm going to have you repeat yourself because you've been cutting off, so go ahead.
Now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. No, so I was just saying, I feel personally involved, and I think when I was in high school, I yelled at my teacher for not telling us about all the different economic systems. He was just prattling on about about capitalism. And I was crying because I was like, all of these people, they're never going to be exposed to other types of economic situations than what they're living in right now. And my I was probably like 15, right? And my teacher was like, don't bear the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I don't think I've ever been able to not. Like, I feel involved. If there's people that are they're not like sad, they're dying, or they're being grossly abused, and in a world where our governments came together in a bid to make the world better, and they have these declaration for human rights types of declarations where we say everyone is entitled to dignity, to safety, to water, to food, all these basic things. When I think about that, gross amount of people who don't have it. I cannot even fathom just living in my city, going to a job, and just fun when I get to do that. But I don't understand it. It's a cognitive dissonance for me to think that there's so much energy and money being put into racing to space. All these things were already quite developed in terms of technology, but I think in terms of philosophical maturity, we were experiencing a bit of a stagnation by comparison with the 40s and the 60s and maybe even the 70s and 80s. I feel like something's gone back. Our concern towards other people isn't what it used to be. There's a lot of cynicism, which is taken as an excuse for non-action. But I'm very, very grateful that even though it seems as though the population has this disconnect, governments are to a certain extent still acting. We're still giving money to foreign aid. So maybe to loop back to your initial questions, should Canadians care? Some Canadians care because it's part of our policy. Global Affairs Canada is at the forefront of a lot of these humanitarian responses, and it is part of our policy to have this outreach to prevent extreme poverty, to address violence against women and girls. So this is part of who we are, and I think since the making of Canada, and especially in the 20th century, Canada has been a forerunner for this type of outreach towards other people. Whereas the U.S. has had a completely distinct foreign policy, Canada has always, historically tried to be more of a conciliator, a negotiator, a bringer of progress and development rather than let's go in and bomb everyone. We created the Blue Helmets, who are there to protect and who are not there to have an aggressive stance, but who are there to observe and protect different peace processes, different election processes. So this has been our role in the past, and I don't see this is the way that Canada shines. It's not just the pull for migration, it's the way that we act and we help them. And I think there's a great many who are privileged enough to know a lot of them, and a lot of people from other countries as well. But I think for Canada, since our international identity is always a little bit like, oh well, we're America's hat and we're just following the U.S. and we're just another state of the U.S. Like all these things are very diminutive when you think of Trudeau Sr. and his outreach towards the international, and maybe it was more concerning economic ties, but the idea was always let's foster all of these different friendships with countries and work together rather than blatant alliances one against the other. So that's how I, in a nutshell, on a Saturday morning, very early, without having studied it, that's how I see Canada's role and why Canadians should not only feel, personally interpelled when they see someone suffering, but they should also feel proud that Canada is actively going around doing stuff based on our capacity. We're doing something to help that situation. So we should be proud with that engagement.
I'm gonna address the chat. Chat says here, Jason says, it sounds like you are alluding to a systems level issue that exists in our global ecosystem. Would you like to speak on that?
I mean, I probably did. I'm trying to think back in a systemic. I don't remember which problem I addressed specifically. There's many problems, obviously, but I mean the point that I wanted to get back to was really that, considering that there's many exist as a country and as an individual.
Sorry, I want you to repeat that because you were cutting
Canadians
off. Go ahead.
Proud
Sorry, reset that. You were cutting off a little bit.
Remember which type of global systemic problem that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've imagined, or I don't think I mentioned anything like overarchingly.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you this?
Mostly, I was trying to think of Canada.
From your coworkers that you work with, the representation of people around the world, Canadians, do you see a lot of Canadians, or do you see a lot more Europeans, or do you see a lot more people from Asia? Like, what are some of the people that are going to do humanitarian work? I mean, this is anecdotal, and by no means is a good representation of how many people. Like, but what do you see from your experience?
I love your pets in the background, by the way. So, like you said, anecdotally, I get to see a lot of everything, and every time it makes me very happy, but it also makes me feel really sad when I hear something happen in their country. So my colleagues right now are from Uganda, Kenya, Nepal, India, Korea, Canada, the UK. That's just like my team right now. And what I love is this concept that exists and which people are trying to push within the international system, the UN and everything. We're trying to push this South for South and cooperation for, like, if one country develops an expertise in, for example, earthquake management, like Nepal, they should come and help Bangladesh, or they should teach, give their expertise to them. Things was happening. Peruvians and Bolivians and Colombians were there helping out in the Ecuador situation, and that's the best thing ever. That is absolutely. I will always be systemically impressed by that.
Were you not? I think you were. Were you not in Ecuador during that earthquake that happened 2 years ago?
No, I was in Nepal during when the earthquake happened.
Wow.
But there was a lot of earthquakes while I was there. I was just not there during the big one.
Oh my gosh.
We survived a lot of aftershocks. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. In the East Coast, we don't get a lot of. I mean, in Montreal, we don't get a lot of earthquakes, but I've had my fair share now.
I cannot imagine how rich some of the conversations you've had with some of these colleagues that are all over the world. I mean, from a personal level to a professional level, your life is so interesting, and the people that are around you are so interesting that are doing something. What's the age group? I mean, if you don't mind me asking, what's the age representation? Whether or not that
there's a lot of. First of all, I wanted to come back on something, and that's to say that a lot of people who do stuff like I do, we kind of at some point get blasé about being super interesting and having all these conversations, and sometimes we literally just need to, like, make fun of people for not having pants, or, like, we have, like, the dead baby joke syndrome is definitely a thing. Like, you need to disconnect. You cannot just be constantly like, oh my God, what's happening in the world? You'll die. You need these kind of coping strategies.
Yeah.
So having good, we have Facebook. There's all kinds of mechanisms out there. But to touch on your other question, it's great actually the diversity of age, because some people come back from retirement and do this. We have a doctor who's an obstetrics and gynecologist who was retired from his job, but he was working in the UK, but he's Bangladeshi, and so when he heard about this, he said, "Oh, can I give back to my community now that I'm 65? I don't need to work in such a stringent frame as a hospital. Can I do something?" So he's here in some of the clinics giving antenatal care to pregnant women, for example. So the age diversity is massive. You have young people. One of my colleagues is 25 and sometimes even younger, and they're there on internships, and they're just so helpful, and they're so energetic, and it's great. And then as you get older, people are different, but you can't generalize. Some people are 50 and they're just as energetic as the 25-year-olds, and some other people have the wisdom because they've seen 35 of these emergencies. Maybe they've also historically seen what's been going on from the 80s and 90s, the 2000s, and like they have an opinion, like kind of on an overall how things have been working as the humanitarian system evolves, as governments learn to react to UN presence, for example. So these are all things that come into play. But age is a big diversity. Gender is a good diversity. Everything is diverse. The only thing that just is that do information management. People who go in the field from a technical background. So this can be mapping, GIS skills, or it can be like data science, or maybe even IT. But so these people, like generally, there's a lot more male colleagues in information management. But I can only see that is changing. Actually, there's more and more interest females in those types of things. And also it's becoming a more diverse role. You don't want an information management officer who's in a corner and just mapping and not doing an outreach. What you need to do is have someone who knows how much better it could be and knows how to chase down the information and chase down the potential and do the linkages. So you definitely don't want someone who's straight out of an IT bachelor's degree here, who doesn't have the knowledge or the imagination to have that added value of thinking about things. I don't want to insult any of the IT persons that I know, definitely not. But I mean, just to get back to the fact that usually there's a lot.
I know
more
a lot of them.
men.
They're pretty much nerds. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. I love it. I love working with nerds, and they're so honestly they have a lot more technical skills than I do. But they're also very helpful for me. Like I can really be like, hey, do you know how to convert a KML into a shapefile? And they're like, yeah, I'm happy to do that for you, because it'll take them 2 seconds. It'll take me like 3 days Googling it and being like, oh, let's try this. I'm tired. I don't know how this works. And so
no, it's cool. That's cool. That's awesome. I want to ask you, how close do you engage with the general public and local people of Bangladesh? So the Bengalis. Is that the right term?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, right.
Well, most of my colleagues are Bengalis.
Okay.
So, yeah. So first and foremost, and that's always brilliant. I love meeting kind of the movers and the shakers of the country that I'm in. And oh, hi, Kitty. Hi, Kitty. And yeah, anyways, no, I love engaging with them because I always feel like usually you see some volunteers, young people, and I watch them go. In Ecuador, I got to work with 3 UN volunteers who were from Ecuador, and they were shining from their competence, brilliance, and energy, and so that was really, really cool. And then in terms of like people in the street and stuff, it's not easy as a woman who doesn't speak Bengali. It's maybe difficult, but yesterday I got to spend 11 hours in the refugee camps with. So we do these things called women-friendly spaces, and they are just kind of makeshift bamboo structures in which men are not allowed, and that can sound very basic if you're an average Canadian and you're like, what the hell? But it's incredible the extent to which these women can be themselves inside these spaces, because they're very oppressed and they're very controlled. Their movement is controlled. They're not allowed out of their tents and stuff when they're amongst the general population. So, but when they go in the women-friendly spaces, they like come alive. And so yesterday, I got so much information and so much energy from these people, and we were there celebrating International Women's Day, right? And I cannot imagine in my life that I will ever have a better experience that celebrates like women taking charge of women for themselves and helping each other out and sharing their stories, and collectively they were doing crafts, they were doing cooking stuff. I got some henna done. They were doing dramatic reenactments, and it's not a dramatic reenactment of like Romeo and Juliet. No, they're doing a dramatic reenactment of child marriage, human trafficking. There was a campaign against dowries, that they reenacted these things, and this is their choice, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. I have not digested everything that I experienced yesterday. So
that sounds so incredible. That sounds so incredible.
Yeah, like, it was mind.
Yeah, and it's so much of that, so much of these sort of grassroots movements and celebrations and spaces, I would say, are not really seen. I mean, like, this idea of like that space that you're talking about, where women can come together and share in a safe space. I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a lot of discussion right now that's happening in Canada and in the Western world about inequality and how we see. I guess for one example, Jordan Peterson is a Canadian university professor who is spoken out about. Namely pronouns and compelled speech, in that the way that people are expected to do certain things in respect of other people. He makes some points about it being compelled speech, and that we shouldn't have to do that because what the government expects us to do is authoritarian. There's a lot of things I'm trying to learn about, Emilienne, and I know that it's difficult and it's very complex what's happening in the world. But when I hear about you talk a little bit about some of the grassroots movements that are happening in worlds, in places where travesties and just raw travesty occurs, and there's no chance for discussion, where you get this really nice room and you're dressed up and you're having these university students get up and speak on things that they've never experienced, there's something to be said about that. And it's very different from what's happening in the West, where a lot of people are having these debates and they're having these discussions where they've never had that experience on the ground. They've never done what you're doing right now. You're literally there and seeing it all in your own eyes, right?
So I have two things to say, and let me know if I cut off. I think.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
First of all,
you're cutting off right now.
Is not politically correct.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just gonna say I think that probably what I'm gonna say is not very politically correct. But I think what you were saying about the West doesn't even really apply to the West. I think it's just North America in terms of the whole the pronoun thing. And I'm an ally of the gender diverse and sexual orientation diverse. I'm an ally. I think people should do what they want, be what they want, and everything. But I have a big issue because I feel like this is what's taking up so much space in the discussion about gender. And I still feel like, can we back up and address actual physical threats to people's lives? And this goes back to kind of, can we stop with the space travel and give everyone toilets? But I feel like there's a lot of, in French we call it nombrilisme, and it's like it's navel gazing. And like I said, I'm a liberalist in terms of what people can do with their sexualities and with their lives and their identities. But from a theoretical standpoint, I think that Europe is a lot more kind of just like, yeah, okay, you're gender this, and you're they're just making multiple different toilets. They're not going to have 800 hours of debate about who should be allowed in which toilets. And my favorite bar back home, just have the toilets are all there's just 5 toilets and a sink, and you just use the one you want, and it's so obvious that it's honestly it's an intellectual insult to people that so much time and energy is wasted talking about who should be allowed in which toilets, and that this would ever come up in a court of law in the US blows my mind. And same thing for, I think, what's the point of theorizing all of the different of trans this and asexual that and pansexual this, and like, I can tell I'm well versed in this, but I think that these diversities tend to obfuscate the fact that most people on the planet we live in exist in a realm where gender still has a basic definition of male and female. So rather than this YouTube auto-destruction of, oh, well, she didn't say the right term at the right moment, and he, she, they, whatever, we're so like oblivious to the fact that we're privileged to be able to discuss this. Instead of having this discussion, can we broaden it out and be more inclusive and look at moments where people are having their rights, their livelihoods, and maybe even their security denied to them for being women? It blows my mind that in Jordan I was getting called whore on the street because these are people who have Ferraris and Porsches and who have access to the internet. They weren't aware of the Me Too campaign, and so this was point one, and I know I'm long-winded and I apologize. Point two is that
no, not at all.
Point two is that two things happened to me this year, and I would like to talk about them because I have no fear in appropriating my own story. And so in January I was in a learning platform put together by a very reputable organization, and one of my colleagues there was from a first world country, and at some point during this context grabbed my ass. Didn't react. I was thinking, oh, this is a good colleague to have. He got a little overexcited. It didn't go anywhere. Whatever. The point is, this marked me and stayed with me for a long time, where I was just like, oh, we were so connecting as professionals. We were having these great debates about all kinds of humanitarian access with military and stuff, like serious discussions. And still, let's slip back and you grab my ass. And it's so annoying because it's so like to this guy, he actually sent me a message yesterday saying Happy International Women's Day, and I was just like, brain work, like whatever. And so he has no idea that what he did marked me, and I will decide to maybe he's not going to watch this, so I don't have an issue with him seeing it. But conversely, the other day, exactly a week ago, I'm walking down the streets here, which have a lot of people on them and everything. I'm walking with a colleague. It's 8 p.m., so it's a bit dark. But so I'm walking closer to the street side, and suddenly I feel someone grab my boob, and then I see a tuk-tuk rushing off in the distance. And I was like, I didn't even have time to react. And it's like, so, and obviously I was dressed up till here. I was not wearing a mini skirt or anything like that. So there was no provocation on my side. In neither of the cases was there a provocation. I think that we need to take a look at these things and not just say it's either the victim or the perpetrator's fault. I think there's a societal entitlement to women's bodies, which still exists. It still exists whether you're in Canada or whether you're in Bangladesh. Whether you're, it doesn't matter. There is still this entitlement of commenting upon women's bodies, of touching women's bodies, of considering them to belong to someone else. And so I don't want to appropriate anyone else's stories, because that's for them to interpret and to do what they want with. But for me, like, the fact of being grabbed one day by someone from a rich country, and then the other day by someone who probably didn't even have access to education, it remains the same. There are things that need to be addressed, and creating another category of sexuality is not going to address those things. And I don't know what will, because I'm not a gender expert. But I think women should take it upon themselves to become an example of strength and an example of saying this is not acceptable. And I think there's a lot of that going on as well. I'm not going to. And I think men should not feel ever threatened. I think men should feel recognition that the fact that women have cognitive abilities, have agencies over their lives. I know my dad has always been.
Think? Emily, you can think? I didn't know that.
Oh my God!
You can formulate thoughts and have an opinion. Oh my goodness!
And not only that, but that women have a lot to contribute to society. It's not just child rearing, and although that's a wonderful, magical thing, they are the unsung heroes. I see women everywhere, kind of silently doing the work that sometimes men speak up a lot. And, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and then I can see their staff kind of going like, taking notes and like, okay, we're gonna like shift his agenda and we're gonna do this. Like, it happens sometimes.
That's not the first time I heard something like that, where some dude gets up. Yeah.
We need all these types of energies in the world, and like I said, I'm not into saying men are this and women are that, because absolutely. I'm a very masculine woman. I'm very proactive. I would have loved to have punched that guy who grabbed my boob, definitely. And I can use power tools more than the random person that I know. But that being said, I think there's
power tools masculinity. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
There needs to be a place for this diversity, and for men to stop feeling oppressed by the patriarchy and to be proud of helping women, smash the patriarchy. That's my Women's Day hope. But I feel really hopeful because of what I saw yesterday. So, even if you get your boob grabbed, it's not a reason to stand down. You just keep on being an example and keep on saying that that's not okay. That's my idea.
Jason says societal entitlement to a woman's body, in quotes, and then he goes, in Toronto we call those pieces of shit. Oh man. That
Piece of shit. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, sorry, it's just been yeah. Wow. That is very powerful. And I was going to ask you. I was thinking about, some of the things that I could take back from this conversation, and I think you fully put it in your in such very succinctly, what I could tell 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds that are in my classroom now. Some of the things that we should understand. Like in class today, we looked at the Google homepage, and the Google homepage has about a collection of 12 graphic short stories, and each of them tell a perspective of a woman and how they navigate the world, and how they, the ins and outs of being a woman. And I thought that was very compelling, sharing those stories. But it's also amazing to hear stories from you. I have tremendous respect for what you do, and I follow you quite a bit, as I said. And just by you telling me some of these, so like it just feels like to me, as a privileged male, when I hear things like that, I go, that's still a thing. And then
it's still
right. And then even like but then 10, 15 years ago when I was a teenager, I have to admit, like hormones and wrestling with my own body and things like that, there's so many things that we need to teach young kids to learn, to teach them early, to know that these are things that exist. And if we don't share these things and we don't talk about these things, they fall through the cracks the same way that people do.
I think the difficulty right now is that it can't be a group of devoted individuals fighting against the entire porn industry and the internet. There needs to be something more. There needs to be recognition for the negative impact that pornography I'm not saying ban all porn. I'm for porn, but in terms of the impact that it has on adolescence and that crucial learning period, I think there needs to be, someone smart out there is probably working on this or is probably thinking about it. But we definitely we shouldn't do like, I think it came up in Ontario that they wanted to ban all, teachings in school about sexuality. And it kind of mind-blowing. I don't know what it's like in Alberta. I mean, you can let me know if it's different. I presume I learned about sexuality in high school when I was 11, 12, before the internet was that much of a big deal.
All I gotta say is that they have a language arts teacher trying to teach that. So let's Alberta's a completely different.
I'm taking it for granted then from my socialistic province perspective.
Chrissy Bell says this is an amazing conversation, and she also says women with opinions, amazing. Never knew.
I know, right?
Maybe I'll. What's your weekend like then? What do you plan on doing?
So yesterday I took about 38 gigs of video and photography, and one of the things that we get to do here is called communicating with communities, and it's just the humanitarian tag phrase for let's give back to these people and let's listen to what they're saying. So what I really want to do is collate all of these videos and geolocate them and find a way to bring them back to the women. I want to print out the photos that I took. I want to give them back, and I'm so excited thinking about when I can give them the photos. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Yesterday one of the plays was about the anti-dowry play. 2 women came up to us yesterday, older ladies. They were like probably in their 50s or 60s, and they were so happy and crying, and they said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And that was like so incredible to think they've never seen women putting on a play about something that they were not in agreement with, or just illustrating a problem within their own society, which is the dowry system. And it was just incredible, and I need to find a way. This is not staying on my hard drive. I need to find a way to give this back, and so I'm maybe hermited up in my little hotel room. Probably gonna order some dal or some naan bread and just chill. I have some friends around too, but I don't know. Maybe I'll go running on the beach. But it's just always reticent to go outside because of that extra energy you have to spend hiding yourself as a white person and sticking out less and shit. But
I think
yeah.
it was minus 19 this morning here in Alberta. Here
What?
yes, minus 19 when we woke up. My car barely started, but yeah, that's another story. Running on the beach. Wow. The chat goes, Chrissy Bell mentioned that, you know, where she went to school and where parts of where she went to school in Alberta, which is another rural community. I've been to that area. We would go to church and talk about women's issues and sexual abuse on International Women's Day. So it's like a day alone where there's, I guess, guest speakers coming in to do that. At my school, we didn't have that, and I think it's really a shame. But it's not anyone to blame, but ourselves, people who don't take up, you know, like if you want something to happen, you got to do it, right? Like if you're a teacher who's aware of these things that are happening around the world, you got to bring it into the classroom. And if you risk having said something that the upper hand management doesn't like, then you risk that, right? And that's nothing compared to some of the, you know, some of what you're doing right now, where you're traversing some of the most dangerous countries in the world and trying to bring attention to the people that most need it on this planet that we share. So I think there should be no excuse.
Yeah. I think we're mal-equipped as a society to recognize the privilege that we have and you know, the influence that we have on other people. We're taught to see this as a manipulation. Or just saying like, oh, well, I'm a boss and I have power, so I get to tell people what to do and what to think. And it's absolutely ridiculous. There's ripple effects, and there's different platforms. There's never been more platforms than now, right? With social media and everything like that. But then again, what about your day-to-day life? And sometimes I see some of my colleagues, and you know, they do things like throwing plastic on the ground, and because there's plastic all over the ground, and then I think to myself, oh, would it be okay if I did that? Like, it would prevent me from having to drag this mango juice can all the way to a place where it will most likely be just burned regardless. But then I think, like, if you have the opportunity to stick to your morals and do something good, yeah, just do it. I'm done doubting it and done saying like, oh, I could be cool and just disregard the rules and stuff. Like, no. Like, or tipping, for example, is another good example. Like, if you're given the opportunity to make someone's day better, why would you deny them that? Unless obviously you're in an economic situation where you can't give a good tip or whatever. But like, if you're in that space and you're in that opportunity, or if someone's asking you a question and you're feeling cynical, you're feeling down, so you're just gonna give a shit answer, you don't know the impact that they could have on someone's life. So whether it's like individual level or within social media, we're unequipped. I have a lot of respect for teachers, by the way. Especially in Quebec, I have a lot of respect for French teachers because French language is freaking hard. I never learned a thing in my classes. I had to learn it in other ways, and our curriculums are ill-equipped to deal with teaching difficult concepts. But I think teachers have not only the privilege of having all that influence over people, I think they have an incredibly difficult task of dealing with industries which are more and more pernicious in terms of their marketing, their capitalism schemes, and the pornography industry, people who are undervaluing teachers. I think teachers should be the most valued of social roles. I mean, doctors are great, but teachers not only have a similar impact, they are undervalued. And that means that those who choose to be teachers are valuing the content of what they're doing a lot more than the outcome, which is the salary and the glory of saying, I'm a doctor. You know, like, no, like, can we be proud of our teachers? And in Scandinavia, they're proud of their teachers. I wish it was like that for us in Canada, because it's part of this kind of immaturity that we have, running after faster cars and bigger weapons